The air in the car was thick with the scent of wilting lilies and my own unshed tears. Every mile that carried me away from my sister Martha's final resting place felt like a betrayal, as if proximity to the cold earth was the last tether I had to her. The drive back to Charleston from the quiet country cemetery was a blur of palmetto trees and gray asphalt, each landmark a painful reminder of a life now confined to memory. I was 74 years old, a widow for a decade, and now a sister left to walk the rest of her road alone. My youngest son Jamal had offered to drive, but I had refused. I needed the solitude, the quiet hum of the engine, the illusion of control, as my world tilted on its axis. He and his wife Kiera had left the cemetery early, saying they needed to check on a few things at the house. Grief was a heavy blanket, and I had wrapped myself in it, finding a strange, suffocating comfort in its weight. All I wanted was the familiarity of my own home, the warm embrace of my husband's armchair, the quiet company of ghosts who had loved me. As I turned onto my street, a street I had lived on for nearly 50 years, a knot of unease tightened in my chest. Something was wrong. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the manicured lawns, but it was my own yard that held a scene of such jarring discord it made me press my foot to the brake. My belongings, the quiet artifacts of my life, were strewn across the St. Augustine grass like casualties of a silent war. My mahogany rocking chair, the one my late husband David had gifted me on our first anniversary, lay on its side, its curved runners pointing accusingly at the sky. A cardboard box, its flaps gaping open, spilled photo albums onto the lawn, their plastic-covered pages glinting in the dying light. My collection of porcelain birds, each one a memory from a different trip, was clustered near the curb as if awaiting a garbage truck. It was a violation, a desecration of a life carefully, lovingly built. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage of bone. I pulled into the driveway, the car lurching to a stop, and for a moment I simply sat there, paralyzed by a disbelief so profound it felt like a physical blow. This had to be a mistake. A cruel joke. Perhaps a burst pipe. A sudden emergency that required emptying the house. My mind scrambled for a rational explanation, anything to ward off the cold dread seeping into my marrow. When my feet touched the concrete, they felt unsteady, as if the very ground beneath me had become untrustworthy. The front door opened before I reached it, and my daughter-in-law Kiera filled the frame. She had a self-satisfied smirk on her face, a look I had come to recognize as the precursor to some fresh demand or subtle cruelty. She was wearing one of my silk scarves, a vibrant blue one David had brought me from a business trip, tied around her head like a trophy. She placed a hand on her stomach, a gesture both theatrical and proprietary. "Oh, Evelyn, you're back," she said, her voice dripping with a sweetness so false it was acidic. "We were just getting things sorted." "Sorted?" I whispered, the word a dry rasp in my throat. My gaze drifted past her, into the dim hallway of the house I had filled with love and laughter for 5 decades. It was barren. The grandfather clock that had chimed on the hour for as long as I could remember was gone. The Persian runner David and I had haggled for in a crowded market was missing. The walls were bare, pockmarked with nail holes where our family portraits had once hung. "Kiera, what is happening? Where are my things?" Jamal appeared behind her, his shoulders slumped, his eyes fixed on the floor. He couldn't look at me. My son, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged and whose nightmares I had soothed, could not meet his mother's eyes. That was when I knew. This was no mistake. This was a coup. "Mama," he mumbled, his voice thick with cowardice. "Things have to change." Kiera stepped forward, her smirk widening. She patted her still flat stomach again. "I'm pregnant, Evelyn. We need the space. Your room is going to be the nursery. It has the best light." The words were delivered with casual brutality, as if she were discussing rearranging furniture, not appending a human life. Pregnant. The announcement, which should have been a cause for joy, was wielded as a weapon, a justification for this monstrous act of cruelty. We can't have a baby in a cramped house full of old things. We need a fresh start. A wave of dizziness washed over me. I gripped the doorframe for support, the rough wood digging into my palm. My sister was in the ground not 6 hours, and here I was being evicted from my own life by my own blood. The grief for Martha became entangled with a sharper grief, one for the son I thought I had raised. The betrayal was a physical sensation, a cold blade twisting deep in my gut. My room? A fresh start. I looked from Kiara's triumphant face to Jamal's averted one. And where exactly did you plan for me to go? Don't be so dramatic, Kiara scoffed, rolling her eyes. We cleared out the back room for you. The one off the laundry. It's cozy. The back room was little more than a glorified closet, a damp, windowless space, where I stored old paint cans and holiday decorations. It was a place for things forgotten, not for a person. The humiliation was a furnace blast, scorching my face, my neck, my chest. They weren't just taking my room, they were demoting me, reducing me from the matriarch of this home to an inconvenient burden to be stored out of sight. I looked at the scattered pieces of my life on the lawn. My wedding china in a box marked donate, my collection of novels piled near a rose bush. They had picked through my existence, assigning value to what they wanted to sell and discarding the rest. The things they had sold, I realized with a sickening lurch, had paid for the new sterile furniture I could now glimpse in the living room. A sleek leather sofa, a glass coffee table. They had sold my past to finance their future. The air left my lungs in a ragged gasp. A scream clawed at the back of my throat, but I swallowed it down. I would not give them the satisfaction of my tears. Not yet. That first night in the back room was the longest of my life. The air was thick with mildew and bleach, a cloying combination that clung to the thin mattress they had thrown on a metal frame. There was no window, only a single bare bulb overhead, that cast harsh, unforgiving shadows on the concrete walls. I could hear them in the main house, their laughter, the television, the mundane soundtrack of a life continuing on without me, within the very walls that were supposed to be my sanctuary. I lay there, fully clothed, on top of the scratchy blanket, and stared into the oppressive darkness. Every creak of the floorboards, every distant murmur of their voices, was a fresh torment. The cold from the concrete floor seeped into my bones, a deep, unshakable chill that had nothing to do with temperature. It was the cold of abandonment. I thought of David, of the warmth of his presence in this house. He would never have allowed this. He had built this home for us, for our family. He had laid the foundation with his own hands, believing it would be a place of safety and love for generations. What would he think now, seeing his son stand by while a venomous stranger dismantled everything he had worked for, everything we had cherished? The question was a burning coal in my chest. How could I have been so blind? For years I had made excuses for them. When Jamal first brought Kiara home, I had tried to embrace her, to welcome her into the family I held so dear. But she had a hardness about her, a transactional quality to her affection, that always left me unsettled. Her compliments were always followed by a request. "Oh, Evelyn, that's a beautiful brooch. You have such wonderful taste. By the way, the car needs new tires, and we're a little short this month." Her love for my son seemed conditional, tied directly to what he, and by extension, I could provide. I had given them money for a down payment on a car, paid off their credit card debt more times than I could count, and always made sure the pantry was stocked, all under the guise of helping them get on their feet. I see now I was not helping. I was enabling. I had poured my savings, the money David and I had carefully set aside for my old age, into the black hole of their perpetual need. I had done it out of love for Jamal, hoping to ease his burdens, hoping to see him happy and secure. I ignored the warning signs, the way Kiara spoke to me when Jamal wasn't around, with that dismissive, condescending tone, the way my valuable possessions, a piece of jewelry here, a silver serving dish there, would quietly disappear only to be met with feigned ignorance when I asked about them. I had chosen to believe my son was simply stressed, that his wife was just young and misguided. I had lied to myself because the truth was too painful to confront. My son was weak and his wife was a predator. Lying in that damp, dark room, the lies I had told myself crumbled away, leaving behind the stark and brutal truth. This wasn't a sudden change. This was the culmination of a long, calculated campaign. They had been slowly erasing me from my own home, from my own life for years. They had drained my finances, isolated me from my other children, Monique and Andre, with carefully crafted stories about how I was becoming difficult and forgetful. Now they had physically displaced me. The pregnancy was not a reason, it was an excuse, an elegant mask for the cruelty they had always intended. A new feeling began to stir beneath the layers of grief and shock. It was a slow, hot burn, starting in the pit of my stomach and spreading through my veins. It was anger, a cold, hard, clarifying anger. It burned away the tears, solidified the trembling in my limbs into a rigid resolve. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my generosity for foolishness. They had underestimated the woman who had survived the lean years, who had raised 3 children, who had nursed a dying husband, and who had just buried her last living sibling. They thought they had broken me. They were wrong. For 3 more days I endured. I ate the meager meals they left for me on a tray outside the door, as if I were a stray animal. I listened to their plans, their voices carrying easily through the thin wood. They were picking out paint colors for the nursery, robin's egg blue. They were selling the last of my furniture online, laughing about the good price they got for my antique vanity table. Each word was another stone laid on the foundation of my rage. I did not cry. I did not complain. I became quiet, observant, a ghost in my own home. I let them believe they had one. I let them grow comfortable in their victory. During the day while they were out, I would slip out of my room and walk through the empty halls. The house felt alien, stripped of its soul, of my soul. On the 3rd day, I was searching for a box of my personal papers, which they had shoved into the back of a hall closet. My hands, covered in dust, finally closed around a familiar metal lockbox. Inside, beneath my birth certificate and my marriage license, were the documents for the house. My fingers traced the raised seal on the deed. I read the names listed under owner: David Carter and Evelyn Carter. And upon his death, sole ownership had transferred to me, Evelyn Carter. My name. Not Jamal's. Not Kiara's. Mine. The paper felt heavy in my hands, as if it were forged from steel. A slow smile spread across my face. It was the first time I had smiled in what felt like a lifetime, and it was a smile devoid of warmth. It was a smile of pure, unadulterated clarity. They had been so arrogant, so confident in my meekness and supposed senility, that they had overlooked the most crucial detail. They had built their entire palace of cruelty on a foundation of sand. They lived here at my pleasure. They had forgotten that this house, this land, this roof over their heads was mine. That very afternoon, I used the old rotary phone in the laundry room, my voice a low, steady whisper, and I called Mr. Jonathan Coleman. He had been our family lawyer for 30 years, a kind, sharp man who had handled David's will with compassion and efficiency. His voice was warm with concern when he heard it was me. "Evelyn, it's good to hear from you, though I'm so sorry about Martha. How are you holding up?" "Not as well as I ought to be, Jonathan," I said, the formality of his first name giving me a sliver of the strength I needed. And then the story poured out of me, not in a torrent of tears and emotion, but in a calm, factual recitation of events: the funeral, the lawn, the back room, the sold furniture, the missing savings. As I spoke, I felt a strange detachment, as if I were describing a scene from a particularly grim novel. By the time I finished, there was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. When Mr. Coleman finally spoke, his voice had lost all its warmth. It was replaced by a cold, professional fury that mirrored my own. "Evelyn," he said, tone clipped and precise, Do not say another word to them. Do not argue. Do not react. Pack a small bag with what you need. I'm booking you a room at a comfortable hotel downtown. I'll send a car for you in 1 hour. It will park at the end of the block. Can you walk that far without being seen? I can, I said, though I knew it would take effort. My knees ached, but my resolve was stronger. Good, he continued. We're going to handle this legally, methodically, and we're going to make them regret the day they thought they could do this to you. Leaving my home felt different this time. It wasn't a retreat. It was a strategic withdrawal. I packed a small overnight bag with the few clothes they hadn't thrown out, my toothbrush, and the deed to the house. I slipped out the back door as dusk was settling, a purple and orange bruise on the horizon. Each step down the block sent a pulse of pain through my knees, but I kept walking, steady and deliberate. I did not look back. I was no longer a victim cowering in a dark room. I was a queen temporarily exiled, planning the reclamation of her kingdom. The hotel room was modest but clean, with a soft bed and a window overlooking the city lights. Mr. Coleman had arranged and paid for everything. After a long hot shower that washed away the grime and mildew of the back room, I felt almost human again. The next morning I met Mr. Coleman at his office. He had already been busy. Spread across his large mahogany desk were bank statements, property records, and a neatly typed list of my assets. He had pulled the records of my pension deposits and my savings account withdrawals. The numbers told a story of systematic theft. For the past 2 years, since I had foolishly added Jamal to my accounts to help me manage them online, there had been a steady drain. Thousands of dollars siphoned off for online shopping, car payments, expensive dinners, and cash withdrawals. They had been living lavishly on my dime while I subsisted on a small allowance they doled out from my own money. They've taken nearly $80,000, Evelyn, Mr. Coleman said, his face grim. The number hung in the air, obscene and staggering. $80,000. The sum total of my security, my peace of mind, gone. And that's not counting the furniture and valuables they sold. He slid a document across the desk. This is a formal eviction notice. It gives them 30 days to vacate your property. This is a demand letter for the full repayment of the $80,000. And this, a faint glint in his eye, is an invoice for back rent at market rate plus utilities. We'll serve them all tomorrow morning. A tremor of fear went through me. Confrontation had never been my nature. For a moment the old Evelyn, the peacemaker, surfaced. But then I saw Kiara's smirk, Jamal's lowered eyes, my rocking chair lying broken on the grass. The fear burned away, leaving only resolve. Do it, I said. The call from Jamal came less than a day later. He was hysterical. Mama, what is this? Eviction? You're kicking us out? Kiara is pregnant. You're going to make your own grandchild homeless. His voice was a high-pitched whine of disbelief and entitlement. He wasn't sorry, only angry that he'd been caught. I let him rant, my silence a weapon he didn't know how to fight. When he finally paused for breath, I spoke, my tone calm and cool. Jamal, you and Kiara have 30 days to vacate my property. You've also received a bill for what you owe me. If you wish to discuss it, your lawyer can contact Mr. Coleman. Lawyer? Mama, this is family. You don't get lawyers involved with family. You and Kiara decided it wasn't about family when you threw me out and put my belongings on the lawn, I replied. This is a legal matter now. Goodbye, Jamal. The click of the receiver was one of the most satisfying sounds I'd ever heard. Kiara tried a different tactic. Her text began syrupy. Evelyn, we're so sorry, we just panicked about the baby. Please come home. When I didn't answer, the sweetness curdled. You're a bitter old woman. You'd rather see your family on the street than help them. You'll die alone. Each message only hardened my certainty. I saved them all as evidence. A week later, stress took its toll. I woke in the hotel to a crushing weight on my chest, pain shooting down my arm. I managed to dial the front desk before the world went dark. I woke in a hospital bed, The steady beep of a monitor my only company. The doctor said it was a mild heart attack, brought on by extreme stress. It was a wake-up call inside a wake-up call. This fight was no longer only for my home, it was for my life. When my children Monique and Andre arrived, I finally told them everything. They listened without judgment, only love and fury on my behalf. "You're coming to live with me, Mama," Monique said firmly. "And Andre and I will handle Jamal." And they did. While I rested in Monique's quiet guest room, they took over the fight. Andre, a contractor, went to the house with a clipboard and documented every missing item. His inventory totaled over $30,000. Monique, with her wide network of friends, began asking around about Kiera. What she uncovered was uglier than I could have imagined. The 30 days passed. Jamal and Kiera, convinced I'd relent, did not move. On the 31st day, the sheriff arrived to enforce the eviction. I wasn't there, but Monique stood on the sidewalk to witness it. She told me later it was a pathetic spectacle. Kiera clutched her stomach, weeping about her delicate condition. Jamal just stood there looking lost. The neighbors came out, people who'd seen my belongings on the lawn weeks before. Their sympathies were not with the young couple being escorted out but with the old woman they'd wronged. During the commotion, the truth about the pregnancy unraveled. One neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a retired nurse, had offered Kiera prenatal vitamins weeks earlier and been rudely dismissed. That day, as Kiera sobbed dramatically, a small pillow slipped beneath her shirt. Mrs. Gable saw it. So did Monique. The whisper spread like wildfire. A fake pregnancy, an elaborate lie that explained everything. It was the final straw for Jamal. Faced with public humiliation, the loss of the house, and the truth of Kiera's deceit, something inside him broke. He saw her for what she was, a manipulative parasite who had systematically destroyed his family for gain. Months passed. Legal proceedings moved slowly but steadily. Kiera vanished soon after, facing fraud charges and a trail of evidence from other victims. Jamal was left to face himself. When he finally came to see me, he looked 10 years older. He didn't make excuses or shift blame. He just sat opposite me in Monique's living room and wept. "I lost my way, Mama," he whispered. "I let her poison me against you. I'm so sorry." I looked at my son, broken but sincere, and felt no rage, only a deep, weary sadness. I had already lost so much. I couldn't bear to lose him too. Forgiveness isn't a switch, it's a journey. But I knew it was one I had to walk, for my own peace if not for his. "We'll see, Jamal," I said softly. "We'll see." I never moved back into that house. The memories were too tainted, the walls too saturated with betrayal. With Andre and Monique's help, I sold it. Closing day felt cleansing, not a loss but a liberation. The proceeds from the sale, combined with Jamal's gradual repayments, gave me a new foundation. I found a bright apartment in a senior community, balcony garden, sunlit rooms, friendly faces. For the first time in years, I was surrounded by people my own age, by women who understood loss and resilience. I joined a book club, took a pottery class, volunteered at the library reading to children. My life, once shrunk to the size of a damp dark room, expanded again, filling with light, laughter, and purpose. A year to the day after Martha's funeral, I sat on my balcony sipping sweet tea, watching the sunset paint Charleston in rose and gold. The air was warm, fragrant with jasmine. My heart felt full, not with grief or betrayal, but with a quiet, steady peace. I had faced the ugliest parts of human nature and survived. I had lost my home, my savings, my illusions, but I had found something far more valuable, my strength, my dignity, myself. I learned that family isn't just blood. It's respect, trust, and love. And I learned that it's never too late to stand up, to fight back, and to reclaim your life. The scars remain, a map of survival, but they're no longer open wounds. They're proof of resilience, a testament to the enduring power of a woman who refused to be broken. Sometimes the hardest path is the one that leads to true peace.